Welcome the anointed ones. Hell hath no fury like a bitter woman watching someone live the life she never had the guts to fight for. Let that simmer for a second, because behind some of the deepest shade thrown at you isn't just jealousy. It's grief in disguise. Here's the truth. Bitterness ages faster than time, and nothing accelerates it more than watching someone younger, more healed, more whole, walk around effortlessly glowing with the freedom she never tasted. And in this case, that someone is you, and the one fuming in silence, an older woman who cannot stand the sight of your liberation. Psychologists call it displaced resentment. Spiritually, it's inherited warfare. But let's be honest. Sometimes it just looks like a church mother with a nasty scowl, side eyes sharper than a ninja star, and a Bible she only opens when it's time to judge somebody under 35. She's not angry because you're wrong. She's angry because you're right. And she never had the courage to be. She sees in you the version of herself she buried under expectation, obedience, and fear. And while you're out here thriving, healing, creating, and glowing without apology, she's stuck in the role she auditioned for decades ago, the martyr in pearls who never truly lived. So what exactly did you do to trigger this silent war? What part of your power has her pacing, praying, and low-key plotting? Buckle up, because today we're diving into 14 brutally honest reasons why a bitter older woman is furious with you, and none of them are what you'd expect. And no, it's not because you wore ripped jeans to brunch. Okay, maybe that too. Let's get into it. Number 1. You expose that her life was a performance, not a legacy. She's not angry just because you're different. She's angry because you're real. You don't wear masks. You don't perform for people's approval. You don't bend yourself to fit outdated molds just to make others feel comfortable. And that terrifies her, because her entire life was built on doing exactly that, performing. She's played the strong woman, the respectful daughter, the long-suffering wife, the spiritual leader, the self-sacrificing mother, but deep down, she resents every role she was forced to play. You, on the other hand, walk in the world unmasked, and that feels like an insult to everything she endured in silence. Your authenticity disrupts her illusions. She spent years convincing herself that suppression was strength, that silence was virtue, that staying in toxic situations made her noble. But when she sees you setting boundaries, speaking your truth, choosing peace over performance, it hits her in a way she can't admit. It makes her question her own decisions. It shakes the foundation of her identity. Because if you can be loved, respected, and whole without sacrificing yourself, then what was all her pain for? And here's what makes it worse. You didn't even try to prove a point. You weren't trying to be a role model, a rebel, or a threat. You were just being yourself. That's what really stings. It's effortless for you, but it would take everything for her to live like that. Because she's so entangled in the expectations, obligations, and false identities that she no longer knows who she truly is underneath it all. She envies the peace you carry, the way people are drawn to you without you having to demand respect. She sees how your authenticity builds trust, how your transparency heals others, how your presence shakes rooms, and it makes her feel invisible, forgotten, passed over. Not because you disrespected her, but because you revealed that a different way was always possible. And she never chose it. She's furious with you because you're living proof that freedom exists, and she never claimed it. Number 2, you refuse to inherit her wounds and wear them like jewelry. She didn't just want you to accept her pain, she wanted you to inherit it like a family heirloom. She expected you to carry it with pride, to treat it like it was sacred. She wanted you to adopt her bitterness, her survival tactics, her distrust of men, her silence, her fear of taking up space. That was her idea of love, passing down pain and calling it protection. But you didn't do that. You saw the dysfunction for what it was and made a decision that she never did. You stopped the cycle. That decision didn't sit right with her because deep down she needed your agreement to validate her suffering. She needed you to repeat the pattern so she could tell herself it wasn't a mistake. It was tradition, but you said no. You questioned everything. You stopped accepting emotional neglect as normal. You chose therapy. You chose honesty. You stopped pretending during family gatherings. You called out what was toxic, even if it meant being labeled the disrespectful one. And the moment you broke away from the script, her rage began to simmer. You didn't just heal, you made her feel exposed, because your healing drew attention to the fact that she never addressed hers. While you were in the process of choosing peace, she was busy holding on to her pain like it was her only form of identity. And to someone like her, your freedom isn't just confusing, it's offensive. It makes her feel left behind. She doesn't understand why you don't respond to pain the same way she did. She thinks you're being dramatic, rebellious, too sensitive. But really, you're just refusing to keep normalizing dysfunction. And that's something she never had the courage to do. You've done in a few short years what she avoided her entire life. You faced the wound, you cleaned it, and you refused to pass it on. She's not just bitter at your choices, she's bitter that they reveal she always had one too. Number 3. Your joy is an insult to her bitterness. Your joy is loud, even when you're not trying. It radiates in your smile, your walk, your presence. And for her, that joy is a slap in the face. She doesn't see it as lighthearted or innocent. She sees it as a challenge. Because to her, happiness wasn't something you earned. It was something you had to suffer for, sacrifice for, bleed for. And even then, you weren't allowed to show it off. So when she sees you laughing freely, loving yourself openly, and choosing joy like it's your birthright, it offends her. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something she never could. She spent decades learning how to survive, not how to live. Her smile became a mask, not an expression. And somewhere along the way, she forgot what joy even felt like. Now she watches you glow in spaces she used to shrink in. You walk into rooms she never felt good enough to enter. You celebrate yourself in ways she never had permission to, and it burns her. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're free. Her bitterness isn't just rooted in jealousy, it's rooted in regret, because she once had that same light, but it was dimmed by other people's expectations, by patriarchal pressure, by religious guilt, by unhealed trauma. So now, when she sees you laughing, dancing, living unapologetically, something inside her aches. And instead of admitting that, she attacks you. She finds flaws in your confidence. She mocks your happiness. She tries to shame you back into the cage she built for herself. But what really unsettles her is that your joy didn't come from an easy life. It came from rising out of pain. You earned that peace, and it shows. Your joy is layered with depth, wisdom, and survival. And that's the part she can't compete with, because she's still stuck in the story that joy has to be postponed until suffering is complete. You, however, chose to rewrite that story. You found joy in the ashes, and that makes her feel like she missed her chance. Number 4. You have the courage to confront the monsters. She silenced herself She spent years silencing herself to keep the peace. She made deals with dysfunction. She kept secrets that ate her alive. Also, the family could look stable. The marriage could seem God-ordained. The abuser could stay protected, and the community could avoid shame. She called it survival. She told herself it was strength, but what it really was surrender. Not the holy kind, the kind that gives your power away and never asks for it back. She convinced herself that playing small was wisdom, that staying silent was noble, that looking the other way was love, and for years that lie helped her sleep at night. But then came you, unafraid, unapologetic, and unwilling to keep pretending. You didn't just question the silence, you broke it. You didn't protect the predator, you named them. You didn't make excuses for the cycle, you called it what it was. And instead of being proud of you, she turned cold, because your bravery didn't inspire her, it confronted her. It reminded her of every time she looked the other way, every time she defended the wrong person, every time she swallowed her voice and choked on regret. Your truth pulled skeletons out of closets she nailed shut. Your honesty made her lies obvious. And now, every time you speak up, she hears it like a mirror shattering. You're not just talking about what happened, you're unintentionally exposing the years she spent enabling it. And that cuts deeper than anything else. Not because you're wrong, but because she knows you're right. And that's the part she can't forgive, not in you, but in herself. You didn't just break generational curses, you broke the silence that protected them, and that level of courage is something she never found in herself. So instead of facing her own shame, She projects it onto you. She calls you rebellious, disrespectful, dramatic. But truthfully, she's just mad that you had the spine to confront what she spent her whole life avoiding. Number 5. You found your voice without asking for her permission. She always thought your voice would come through her, that you'd grow into yourself by following her script, her rules, her tone, her timing. She imagined herself as the mentor, the mother figure, the seasoned woman whose approval you'd crave. She believed you'd stay in her shadow until she decided you were ready to step into your own. But what she didn't expect, what she can't stand, is that you stepped into your power without ever needing her permission. You didn't wait for her to validate your decisions. You didn't tiptoe around her insecurities. You didn't play small to protect her sense of superiority. Instead, you spoke, loudly, clearly, and on your own terms. You started saying things she didn't dare to say. You started walking in confidence she never had. And suddenly, she wasn't your gatekeeper. She was just another person trying to control a light she couldn't dim. That shook her, because power to her was something to be rationed, earned, given in crumbs by authority figures. She was taught that confidence in women needed approval first, that it needed to be sweet, palatable, and submissive. So when you showed up fierce, bold, and unapologetically grounded in who you are, it disrupted her entire framework. You skipped the obedience phase. You skipped the flattery. You skipped asking for her hand in your becoming, and that offended her more than anything else. She confuses your independence with disrespect, but what she really feels is powerlessness. For the first time, she can't control your narrative. She can't mold your identity. She can't take credit for your becoming. And the more you shine on your own terms, the more invisible she feels. She expected to be your authority figure, but you became your own. And every time you speak with clarity and stand in your truth, it reminds her that she gave up her own voice so long ago, she doesn't even remember what it sounds like. Number 6. You refuse to shrink just to keep her comfortable. She spent her entire life learning how to take up less space. She learned how to stay quiet when she had something to say, how to lower her gaze when she wanted to look up, how to soften her power so it wouldn't intimidate the people around her. Every room she entered, she read it like a battlefield, figuring out who she needed to shrink for just to survive it. Whether it was a husband, a boss, a church, or her own mother, she made herself small to keep the peace. She called it grace, humility, wisdom. But the truth? It was fear dressed in tradition. Then you came along, and you didn't do any of that. You didn't dim yourself to fit into broken spaces. You didn't minimize your gifts to make others feel bigger. You didn't apologize for your voice, your ideas, your glow. You didn't wait for permission to be visible. You walked in fully. You took up space mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and you did it with a calm confidence that didn't ask to be liked. That was the trigger. Because for someone like her, your boldness doesn't look admirable. It looks offensive. It makes her feel like all the shrinking she did, all the boundaries she never pushed, all the dreams she downsized to please others, might have been for nothing. You didn't just grow beyond the cage. You exposed the fact that the cage was never locked to begin with. She can't stand how free you are. Not because you're arrogant, but because you prove that she could have been too. Your presence doesn't just challenge her. It erases the excuses she's clung to for decades. And that kind of truth doesn't feel enlightening. It feels like an attack. She made peace with being small. She turned it into her identity. So when you refused to do the same, she took it personally. You didn't just break the mold she tried to pass on. You shattered it. And in doing so, you didn't just expand your life. You forced her to confront how much of hers she gave away. Number 7. You surpassed her, spiritually, and she knows it. She prides herself on being a woman of God. She's memorized the verses, mastered the church etiquette, and built her identity around religious authority. To outsiders, she looks like the blueprint for spiritual maturity, disciplined, devoted, well-versed. But behind the performance is someone who learned religion as a tool for control, not transformation. She uses it to position herself above others, to silence questions, to demand respect she hasn't earned through compassion. Her version of spirituality is rule-heavy but heart-empty. And while she claims to walk with God, she's long stopped listening. Then you came along, and without a robe, a title, or a platform, you embodied the very thing she's been pretending to be. You carried divine energy without the need to announce it. You weren't quoting scripture every second, but people felt God in your presence. Your discernment didn't come from rituals, it came from alignment. Your wisdom didn't come from church programs, it came from listening to your soul. You didn't study power, you remembered it. And that's what exposed her. She resents how freely your spirit moves, how prayers seem to find their answer around you, how people are drawn to your light even when you're not trying. She can't explain it, so she tries to discredit it, calls you too new age, too radical, or too emotional. But the truth is, your existence makes her question if she ever truly knew the God she talks about. You don't fear God, you know God. And that unnerves her, because she spent decades in fear-based obedience, and you're walking in fearless intimacy. What truly threatens her isn't your knowledge, it's your authority, not man-made authority, not church-given status, but spiritual authority, the kind that comes from doing the inner work, healing the bloodline, walking through fire, and still choosing love. That kind of power can't be faked. It can't be earned by age, and she knows that. She just never thought someone like you, someone younger, freer, less indoctrinated, would carry more divine weight than she ever has. So now, every time you show up in peace, power, and clarity, she feels her religious mask slipping. And the scariest part for her? Deep down, she knows she's no longer the spiritual elder in the room. You are. Number 8. You're living proof that pain doesn't have to harden you. She went through pain and decided that softness was a liability. Vulnerability to her became something to fear, not something to honor. She toughened up, closed off, and shut down parts of herself that once felt too exposed. And over time, she didn't just build walls, she made a home inside them. She renamed her numbness maturity. She called her avoidance discernment. She labeled her distrust as experience. And eventually, she convinced herself that being hard was the only way to be safe. Then she met you, and your softness confused her. Not weakness, softness. The kind that still smiles after betrayal. The kind that loves without a hidden agenda. The kind that has every reason to hate the world, but still chooses to see the beauty in it. You didn't just go through pain, you grew from it. And that growth didn't make you bitter, it made you wiser without losing your heart. That's what shook her. Because she always believed healing required hardness. That surviving meant emotionally shutting down. But here you are, fully alive, fully present, fully open. And your ability to stay gentle, to remain loving, despite everything you've been through, makes her question everything she believed about strength. She watches you set boundaries without burning bridges. She sees how you protect your peace without becoming paranoid. You love, but you're not naive. You forgive, but you don't forget. You walk with a grace she can't explain because she's never experienced it. Not even after all her years of surviving. That threatens her because your life forces her to ask, what if I didn't have to become cold to feel safe? What if I could have healed without becoming hard? Those are questions she doesn't want to answer, because if the answer is yes, then it means all the armor she built might have been unnecessary. All the years spent shutting people out might have been based on fear, not wisdom. You're living proof that scars don't have to become shields, that pain doesn't have to become personality. And that's what makes her so uncomfortable, because your softness isn't just strength, it's truth. And it contradicts the story she's been telling herself just to survive. Number 9. She hates that people gravitate toward you, effortlessly. She spent most of her life working for attention, curating herself to be noticed, respected, praised. She learned how to perform strength, how to talk the talk, how to demand recognition, even when it wasn't deserved. She thinks power is something you hustle for, something you force people to see. So when she watches you, someone who simply is, effortlessly draw people in, she feels invisible in a way that makes her burn inside. You don't chase validation. You don't beg for a seat at the table. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard or exaggerate your pain to be seen. People just feel you. They respect you before you even speak. They're loyal without needing a reward. And that's the part she can't stand. Because in her world, approval is currency. It's something you manipulate, strategize for, and sometimes even guilt people into giving. But you attract it without lifting a finger, and she doesn't know how to compete with that. She watches you walk into rooms and shift the energy without trying. She sees how people lean in when you speak, how they light up when you're near, how they trust you with things they wouldn't tell anyone else, and it makes her feel like all her efforts, every performance, every carefully constructed version of herself have been for nothing. Because no matter how loud she gets, she can't replicate your presence. The truth is, you carry something she doesn't, authentic resonance. It's not about looks, titles, or how many scriptures she can recite. It's not about how long she's been on this earth, or how many people she's impressed. It's about what's inside you, that deep inner clarity, that healed energy, that grounded truth. You radiate something real, and people feel safe in it. She craves the loyalty you receive, but doesn't realize it's not something you demand. It's something you embody. And that drives her into a quiet madness, not because she thinks you don't deserve it, but because deep down, she knows she never earned it the way you have. Number 10. You unknowingly dismantled her narcissistic throne. She created a world where she was always at the center, emotionally, spiritually, and even morally. Everyone had a role, and every role was designed to protect her image. She was the wise one, the strong one, the victim, the matriarch, the one who sacrificed it all. And your role? You were supposed to stay small, stay wounded, stay in need of her approval. You were meant to be the cautionary tale, the one who never quite got it right, the one whose shine never outshined hers. That balance made her feel important. Your brokenness was never just tolerated, it was necessary to keep her pedestal steady. But you broke the script, you healed, you evolved. You stopped playing the lesser role, you stopped showing up as the dependent one. You stopped needing her permission, her praise, her validation. And in doing that, you unintentionally collapsed the power structure she had built her identity on. Without even realizing it, you dismantled the fragile throne she was sitting on, one that only worked if you stayed beneath her. She didn't want you to rise. She wanted you to stay fractured so she could stay relevant. Your wounds made her feel superior. Your confusion made her feel wise. Your silence made her feel powerful. So when you found your voice, when you stepped into your power, when you started getting respect she used to manipulate out of people, it triggered something deep and bitter in her. She masks it well. Maybe she calls it concern. Maybe she hides it behind passive comments or judgmental glances. But underneath all that, she's angry, not just because you grew, but because you did it without her. And worse, you did it in spite of her. You rose in the very environment that was meant to keep you buried, and that makes her feel powerless. She wasn't prepared for the healed version of you. That version doesn't need her to feel valid. That version doesn't shrink anymore. That version sees through her manipulation. And for someone who built a kingdom on control, your freedom feels like treason. Number 11. You see through the stories she built her identity around. She's crafted her life like a myth, layered with half-truths, exaggerations, and carefully edited pain. To everyone else, she's the one who held the family together, who gave up her dreams for others, who was always there no matter what. Her stories are polished, dramatic, and soaked in sacrifice. And for years people believed them. They pitied her, praised her, gave her moral superiority just for surviving. But you see through it. You don't flinch at her sob stories because you remember the parts she leaves out. You don't worship her suffering because you recognize how she's used it as currency. You know the contradictions in her tales. You know the abuse she ignored, the cruelty she dished out behind closed doors, the manipulation laced in her kindness. And what bothers her most is that you're not fooled by the costume. You don't fall for the performance, and that unsettles her deeply. She's built her entire identity on the idea that she's the strong one, the unappreciated one, the misunderstood one. But you've seen the coldness beneath the tears, the control behind the caretaking, the guilt-tripping hidden in the advice. And because you won't pretend with her, because you see her as she truly is, she feels exposed. She can lie to the world, but she can't lie to you, and that makes her furious. Not just because she's been found out, but because she can't manipulate you back into your place. You don't respond the way others do. You don't rush to rescue her. You don't bend under her guilt. And your clarity, your ability to call her out with your silence, with your choices, with your truth, is something she can't control. To someone who relies on illusion, your discernment feels like betrayal. But the truth is, you were never the betrayer. You were just the one who refused to keep the lie alive. You didn't dishonor her legacy. You just stopped pretending it was holy. And for a woman who's built her power on revisionist history, your ability to remember accurately is more dangerous than anything else. Number 12. You're doing in a few years what took her a lifetime and she still failed. You didn't wait for someone to come rescue you. You didn't wait until your 50s to start healing. You didn't let the trauma fester until it hardened into identity. You felt the dysfunction, you faced it head on, and you started changing even when it hurt. And the most uncomfortable part for her? You're doing all of this quickly, with awareness, with courage, with no blueprint but your own. You're not perfect, but you're moving. You're shifting timelines that she's been stuck in for decades, and she doesn't know whether to envy you or fear you. She spent years justifying stagnation, telling herself the timing wasn't right, that it was too late, that she didn't have the tools, the language, or the support. She buried her transformation under obligations and distractions, and in her mind, that bought her more time. But then came you, walking in with your clarity, your spiritual downloads, your inner work, your healing boundaries, and suddenly her excuses started to look like what they really were: avoidance. She tells herself you're just lucky, that you had it easier, that the world is different now. But she knows that's not true. She sees how much you've battled, how much you've carried, and still you're outpacing her, not in competition but in evolution. You've forgiven things she still holds onto like trophies. You've let go of narratives she still repeats to feel relevant. You're doing in 5 years what she couldn't accomplish in 5 decades, and that's a reality she can't digest without choking on her own regret. It's not just the speed that bothers her, it's the depth. Your transformation isn't surface level, it's rooted. You're healing ancestral wounds, breaking patterns, and unlocking levels of awareness that she never even imagined were possible. And it makes her feel irrelevant, like a VHS in a streaming world. Not because you've disrespected her, but because you've quietly outgrown her. And her worldview doesn't have space for that. She's not angry because you've evolved. She's angry because your evolution reminds her that she never did. Number 13. You are everything she pretended to be. She built herself out of performance. Every version of her, polished, poised, and powerful, was curated for applause. She crafted identities that would win her approval, admiration, maybe even a sense of safety. To the outside world, she seemed accomplished, righteous, and respected. But under all of that, she was fragmented. She was constantly shape-shifting, constantly managing perceptions, constantly exhausting herself trying to keep up the illusion of being someone she never truly felt like inside. Then you walked in, real, raw, unfiltered, and without trying, you carried the very presence she spent her whole life faking. You didn't need titles to be respected. You didn't need to quote spiritual doctrine to sound wise. You didn't need to manipulate your voice or shrink your spirit to feel accepted. You just were. And people felt it. They trusted you, leaned toward you, listened to you. And not because you demanded it, but because your authenticity magnetized it. That's what cut her deep. She wore strength like armor. You became strong by healing. She wore confidence like a mask. You're confident because you know yourself. She used performance to gain influence. You influence others just by being whole. And the part that burns her the most, everyone can feel the difference. People may not know the full story, but they know what's real. And you are. She spent years trying to be who you are naturally. Every time she sees someone value you for your truth, she feels the weight of her own lies. Every time you speak with clarity and vulnerability, it reminds her how long she's been hiding behind walls. You live in a way she only dreamed of. And because she never gave herself that freedom, your presence becomes a mirror, one she never asked for but can't look away from. It's not just jealousy, it's grief. She's mourning the version of herself she never had the courage to be. And the more you rise in your realness, the more it exposes how much of her life was a performance no one even asked for. Number 14. You refused to worship her trauma, and she took it as rebellion. She didn't just want empathy, she wanted allegiance. She wanted you to prove your love by repeating her suffering, to walk through the same fire, not because you had to, but because she did. In her mind, loyalty meant agreeing that her pain was sacred, her struggle was necessary, and her wounds were the highest form of identity. And when you didn't echo her choices, when you started healing instead of hurting, she saw it as a personal betrayal. She expected you to keep the pain alive, to wear it like a badge, to carry the generational weight without ever asking why it was handed to you in the first place. But you questioned it. You asked why everything had to be so hard, why pain had to be glorified, why healing was treated like treason. And that questioning alone made her feel like you were dishonoring her experience. But you weren't rebelling, you were liberating. You weren't disrespecting her pain, you were refusing to let it chain you. You took what tried to destroy you and turned it into something sacred. You turned silence into wisdom. You turned betrayal into boundaries. You turned heartbreak into clarity. You didn't stay in the trauma, you transcended it. And that's what made her uncomfortable. Because for her, pain became an altar, a place where she could be pitied, protected, and praised. She built her identity around it, and anyone who chose to live differently felt like a threat to that temple. You didn't worship there, you walked away, and in doing so, you became something she didn't understand, free. She's not mad because you healed. She's mad because you refused to believe that suffering was the only way to prove your strength. She's mad because you redefined loyalty, not as shared wounds, but as shared truth. And deep down, she knows that your path took more courage than hers ever did. You chose to honor her past without repeating it. You honored her pain without building your home in it. And that, more than anything, felt like rebellion. Because it forced her to confront the question she's been avoiding her whole life. Was all that pain really necessary? Or did I just never choose to leave it? The fury she holds toward you isn't really about you. It's about what you represent. You are a living contradiction to every lie she told herself to survive. You are the healed version she didn't believe was possible. You're the proof that the pain didn't have to become a prison. That femininity doesn't require shrinking, that love doesn't require martyrdom, that God doesn't require performance, and that identity doesn't require permission. Your existence calls out everything she buried. And that's why she fights you. Not with fists, but with silence, shade, and subtle sabotage. Because to accept your power would mean admitting she gave hers away. To embrace your truth would mean admitting she spent her life performing instead of becoming. And that is a grief she doesn't know how to face. But none of this should dim your light. Her resentment is not your responsibility. Her bitterness is not your burden. You are not here to stay small so others can feel big. You are not here to inherit suffering as a family tradition. You are not here to kneel at altars built from unhealed wounds. You are here to walk in truth, to rise, to free yourself. And by doing that, you free generations, both past and future. So let her be uncomfortable. Let her project. Let her grumble in disbelief while you glow in peace. You are not her enemy. You are her unchosen mirror. And even if she never admits it, a part of her knows you did what she never could. And that, chosen one, is why her fury burns so quietly and so deep. If this message stirred something deep in you, don't just scroll on. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a community that speaks truth without sugarcoating it. Like this video if you're done shrinking to protect fragile egos. Drop a comment if you've ever had to outgrow someone who couldn't handle your healing. And share this with someone who's silently battling bitterness masked as mentorship. It might be the clarity they've been praying for. This channel isn't for the fake, the fearful, or the performative. It's for the bold, the awake, and the ones reclaiming their power, just like you. Let's keep shaking the table. Let's keep telling the truth. Subscribe now, and never apologize for evolving again. God bless you.